So we are going to get back into After Effects this week. That's what we do every week now. But before we jump into the program, we actually need to download a few items. So we're going to actually work with green screen footage today. We're going to pull a chroma key. It's pretty simple to do, but it can get a little bit more complicated depending on what stuff you choose. So what I went ahead and chose was this little doggy from Pixabay. You can download the doggy too if you have a interesting idea to use with him. I will say that the dog is considerably more difficult than all of these other green screen items that we see on here. So I just searched for green screen and this is what came up. So if you see all these like 3D generated items on a chroma key background, those are really, really easy to pull the key, and it's okay for you guys to do that this time around. If it's something that looks interesting to you, pick something based on the content and not how difficult it actually is. I do want you guys to choose something though that is a foreground element. So if I scoot around on this thing, hey, these flags could be in the foreground, this plane could be in the foreground, there's a drone, numbers, all this fun stuff. But there are a couple of things, I'm sure I can find one in here, that would not be a foreground element. So yeah, like this, where the green screen is actually in the background. I don't want you guys to pull something like that. Or yeah, these curtains that move away and reveal something in the background. Those things wouldn't exactly work for our application today. So let's avoid that stuff. Most things are foreground elements and stuff, but if you wanted to grab something that was like a computer screen or something like that, don't do that. Pick something that goes in the foreground. All right, so I downloaded my doggy. If I click on that real quick, I'll notice that I can download it in all sorts of different resolutions. I downloaded mine in 4K. I probably don't need all that resolution because this is like a foreground element that I'm going to resize within whatever I choose as my background. So if my background's 1920 by 1080, the dog definitely doesn't need to be that big, but having that much resolution gives me a lot of versatility, so I can kind of do whatever I need with it. If I happen to download a background that's much larger, then I don't have to go back and re-download anything. I just resize it. Okay, so that's one thing that we're going to get. Then we're going to get a background that makes sense for our foreground element. In this case, I'm going to pull these mountains. And what I want to do is make the dog like Godzilla in the background, right? So I'm going to put him behind these mountains and he's going to be really large. It'll be hopefully amusing in some way. But I chose these mountains specifically because the lighting on it and stuff. We can adjust color just fine. That's really easy. But lighting is something that you can kind of pretend to do in After Effects or Photoshop, but it doesn't have the same quality. It looks artificial. So if I look at my dog, I can see that he's mostly flat, but he's got like a rim light around the back here. It's a little bit brighter here. And it is a really flat color profile in general. It looks like kind of dull and stuff compared to most footage that you're probably working with. So I'll pump that up before I actually do the green screen and stuff. But he's got that kind of backlight on the right side, and so do these mountains. So that should match relatively okay. So I'm going to download this real quick. I don't think I've downloaded it already. Whoops. Right click, save image as, and we'll just call it mountains. I'll put it on the desktop so it's nice and easy to find. So once again, if you guys have forgotten this stuff, I'm sure you haven't, but if you do a Google image search, you can always click on tools and then large size. That way you're finding things that are actually pretty large. You want something that's at least like 1920 by 1080. If you click on anything that piques your fancy, you hover over it over here, and then you can see 1920 by 1200, which is greater than full HD video size. So that's perfect for me. I've downloaded both of those things and I'm ready to go. We can also download this thing early, and it'll take me a little while to get to this. We'll do the chroma key stuff first before we do this. But there is a preset that I want you guys to download, and I think it can come in handy for something like chroma key, and that is the Jarley's Deadpool handheld camera preset, and you can find that on premierepro.net. I will link you to this in the video description on YouTube, so you can get this nice and easy. And there's a whole bunch of different versions of this. There's one for Vegas, there's one for After Effects, there's one for Premiere. It's for like all these different editors and effects programs, and we definitely want the one for After Effects. So make sure that you navigate to the one that says now also for After Effects. And the reason why this is so strong for After Effects versus say something like Premiere, well, you guys don't even know what it is, do you? So it is it takes your footage that is still maybe locked down on a tripod and gives it a faux camera movement. It looks like you're like the camera is handheld, even though the camera was presumably on a tripod, or in this case it doesn't even exist. You know, we're kind of putting it together in the program. It's a big composite that looks still, but we'll add the motion of a handheld camera to make it look, I don't know, a little more real or something different. So that's what it does. But what's really powerful about using it in After Effects is that you can actually add that motion blur that we did way back on the ball bounce project that made everything look a little bit cleaner and nicer, and the movement was smoother and stuff because it had the motion blur there. It'll make this camera movement look more realistic because you would have motion blur from camera movement. So that's why I would always use this thing in After Effects instead of something like Premiere. That said, it would work in Premiere if you are a Premiere user and you don't care about the motion blur. All right, so we'll go ahead and download this real quick too. We'll save that link, and it will. That says HTML, and we don't want that. So maybe we'll just click it, and there it is. It is a zip file, and it's fine to keep it as a zip file for now. We will deal with this stuff later. So I'm going to save that on my desktop so I can get to it easily. All right, at this point we have the assets we need, and we can jump on over to After Effects and we can import those two things. So I'm going to go down, import. I think maybe both are on the desktop. I'm going to import my background. Where's that? That's mountains. Great. And I will import my dog. There it is, chroma key. Okay, so I can pull my key first, or I can pull my key after my background is in place. I would just start building your composition and pull your key in the middle of your composition. But either way is going to work fine for you. If you wanted to make a composition out of the chroma key footage and then pull it and then put that composition into a new composition as a pre-comp, that would work just fine for you. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our background and create a new composition out of it. So everything will be conformed to the size of the background. And I'm just going to call this background, so it's nice and easy for me to tell what's going on. Also, I'm going to add my chroma key footage on top of that. There we go. And I'll resize it. If I seem slower today, I'm working on my trackpad too. I am all kinds of unorganized today, but we'll get over it. Okay, so now I have my dog footage over my background. I can play that back and make sure everything's fine. Yep, there's the dog, and the dog likes the treat. He looks pretty happy. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that this is a lot harder than the other footage, and that's because we have all of these like shadows, and the green screen isn't lit evenly throughout. So pulling a key here is a little bit more difficult. So before I actually pull that key, I'm going to add a lumetri color to this. And if we haven't used lumetri color, if last time around we used just like hue and saturation or whatever control was normal for us in Photoshop to adjust our text cutout background, lumetri color is pretty easy to use. It's like the color grading application or preset, not preset, it's the color grading effect, that's what it is, in Premiere, and it also exists in After Effects, but it's not quite as user friendly in After Effects, but all the same stuff's there. And if I just twirl down on basic correction, I can see a whole bunch of stuff here that can make my life a lot easier, and it's all kind of in one place, so it makes things even better. So what I'm going to do here is just fix how flat it is and turn up the contrast a little bit, and then I'm going to add some saturation, and that should give me a better idea of what's going on with my green screen. You can see how many issues we have here. We have this red string on the ground, it looks like, and then we have all these shadows, and the bottom right corner is much brighter than the top left corner, and the right in general is brighter than the left in general. So there's this thing that we can do with a chroma key that can make our lives a whole lot easier, and that is, rather than try to pull all of this area, we can pull just the areas around the dog or our subject itself. So I'm going to do that by creating a mask. And if we've worked with the pen tool before, we might have accidentally made masks before. So if you click on the pen tool and you start drawing, you'll have a shape, right? And we can make that shape a line if we want to, or we can make it a filled in shape. But if you click on a layer in your layer panel, then the program assumes that you're wanting to make a mask. And what we're going to do is we're just going to make a mask around our subject, and it's called a garbage mask. So it gets rid of all of the garbage surrounding your subject. And once we close off our mask, then we'll see that all the stuff outside the mask is now gone. If for some reason your mask is like inverted, like it's just showing the green portion and not the subject that you wanted to cut out, that you like masked in reverse, there's no trouble there. If you twirl down under masks, which is now an option under your video, you should be able to see that this mask is set for add, and you can instead click subtract, and you would have the inverse of what we have here. Now we will work more with masks, because I'm going to mask out this this mountain and stuff and put the dog behind the mountain. But I wanted to show you, yeah, there's that trackpad for you. I wanted to show you a couple of other things with the masks that could be helpful and interesting early. So we can find, if we just twirl down on mask 1 or mask 2 or whichever mask you have here, you'll see mask feather and mask opacity. We can turn down the opacity of a mask or whatever's inside your mask. You can expand your mask outward, and then you can also feather the edge of your mask. All of these things could be very helpful for us. This dog doesn't move around too much. I'm just going to kind of scrub through real quick and see if his head points out of the mask. We see that hand reaching down here, and maybe I'll trim out my video so I don't see that. I just see the dog there. Okay, so I'm not going to really mess with this at all yet, but it's good to know that it's there, especially if I have some kind of unclean line that is a result of my chroma key stuff. Okay, so that's how we mess with masks. Oh, one more thing with masks. right next to mask 1, you see a little color there, and that's the color for the mask path. So that's the line that shows you the shape of your mask. If we click on that color, we can change that color. So if you're having trouble seeing it, say your mask path is green, it might be a little bit tough for you to see the actual mask. We can change that to say yellow, or how about red, because that's a complement, right? Now we can really see that pretty well. Okay, so masks in a nutshell there. Okay, so we have a garbage mask now. Now we can actually do the chroma key work. So if we go into effects and presets, the panel there for that, and we can kind of search for our effects. By the way, if you don't have this already as a panel in your program, you can always go up to Window and then search for effects and presets. Make sure that that's got a check mark next to it, and it will pop up. And we're just going to search for key light. So as I start typing key light, I'll find key light 1.2, and this has been around forever and ever. Even when I was in undergrad, I was using key light for chroma key, and it still works very, very well. Okay, so here's key light. We're just gonna twirl up on Lumetri color so it doesn't bother us anymore. I'm going to click on the color picker for screen color, and then I'm going to click the green around my subject. And it did an okay job initially. Like the green is out of there. If I turn off my mask path visibility, which is this little toggle here that says toggle mask and shape path visibility, then I can see what's actually going on. I can still see some remnants of that green screen, and I have a little bit of transparency in my dog. So that's not perfect. It did an okay job though. So if I go under view and I click from final result to screen matte, I'll see this black and white view. And what is pure black is being keyed out, and what is pure white is being left behind. It's really kind of simple to do. If I need to do anything with my color picker, it's important that I turn that stuff off so I can always jump back to source and see the original. So if you have this like de-spill bias, so there's some spill of green on the dog, if I click on that, you see how it's still green, but it's a little bit different. I can maybe salvage some of that transparency on the dog right away. So if I jump back, all right, now it's considerably different. I'm losing a lot of stuff. So let's try to fix that up. Actually, if I jump to a final result, I probably lost most of the dog. So maybe that de-spill did not do good enough job here. So maybe I'll just jump that a little bit. Go back to screen matte. See how that worked? Not well. De-spill bias. Let's just put that back in the regular old green, because that did not do a great job for us. We'll jump back to screen matte, and then all of a sudden, all right, so we have our dog is mostly white and we have some black over here. Maybe if I just turn this off entirely and go to a white, that's, yeah, that definitely looks better. So in my case, the de-spill bias didn't do such a good job. So there's this pre-screen blur here that we can turn up, and that's going to help us out a little bit, especially if you have some kind of like artifacts and stuff in the background. We can turn that up more and more and more and actually see that stuff kind of disappear. But the more you do this, the more you kind of blur some of the areas of your subject, and that might not be the best thing. So that's what it does, but let's go ahead and turn it all the way down for now and see if we can clean this stuff up without having to use the screen pre-blur. Instead, we're going to twirl down on screen matte, and you'll see these things for clip black and clip white. These things are really important. So our clip black, as we start turning that up, you see all the black area of our image start to grow. So now we have a pure black on all of that background, which is exactly what we want. Okay, and then we can clip white, and we would turn that in the opposite direction. And now all of a sudden our dog is turning a pure white. So that means that he's no longer quite transparent. And then we have all of these little areas of green that bled onto the dog, and they were pretty significantly green. Trackpad, look at that. My dog just went off the screen. So maybe that pre-blur will help with those areas. It looks like it does. So I can maybe turn that up a little bit, and now I'm saving some of those areas. So the idea here is that you want to get yourself a pure black on the outside and a pure white on the inside. Now if I jump back to my final result, I should see an okay job. We lost a little bit of the dog's neck, and we have some of the stuff around the dog's feet. His shadows there and stuff aren't doing so well for us. So if we want to mess with our matte, not our mask, right? Our matte, the area that's been keyed, we can adjust, we can choke that up or down so we can expand the outside edges. So now we've brought back the neck and stuff for this dog, but we've gained all this gray here, which is not exactly what we want. Okay, so I messed with this for a couple of minutes, trying to get it to look a little bit nicer. A couple of things that I did add were this replace color, which if you saw when I grew my screen, I had that like gray background around my dog. You can actually change that color to be whatever you want, and then I just used the color picker to grab an area of sky. So it's not a pure white, but it kind of matches the sky, since that's kind of where I'm putting my dog. So now if I take my dog and kind of move him around the sky, that actually looks okay, that area right around the key. And I'm not worried too much about his feet. I could spend a lot more time on it to kind of clean that stuff up. And I will probably adjust my mask so I can clean up that edge that got a little bit white there. Okay. And I won't worry about his feet anymore, because I'm just going to kind of tuck his head back behind these mountains here, and that foot doesn't bother me that much. Okay, so chances are, if you downloaded one of those easier like 3D generated chroma key items, you could have maybe clicked the screen color, clicked, and it was just gone and perfect and stuff. But I did want to demonstrate how difficult these things could be, and how much you have to kind of mess with them to get what you want, especially if they were recorded in a way where maybe green pours onto your subject, which is a big thing, or there's motion blur, or there's something that's not a clean line. So something like smoke, or things that are particles, rain and stuff like that. Motion blur is a big thing too, right? So if you are working with footage that contains something like that, chances are you'll really have to work with it to pull a clean key. And if you do that, I'll be impressed. So, you know, when you post your results, let me know how difficult it was. All right, so I've pulled my dog key, and I feel like that's looking okay enough. We're going to have to do some more color correction on our doggy. But before that, I just want to kind of get him in place where I want him. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate my background. The quick way to do this as a shortcut is Control-D for duplicate. And I'm going to move that. I'm going to sandwich my chroma key footage between my background 1 and my background 2. And I'm going to rename my background to foreground. So my chroma key stuff is acting as a midground. My foreground is going to be a mountain, and my background is the sky and stuff. So depending on what your background is, you might not have to do this, but it is a nice way to kind of embed your stuff. Now if I jump in here, I'm going to do a pretty quick mask for you guys. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this without a mouse. Okay, I'm going to do a quick mask for you guys. I'm just going to make sure that I have enough to hide my dog behind, and that's all I really care about. So None of this really matters that much that I get it, but I might just do it anyway. Masking with a trackpad. If you guys are doing this, I have respect for you too. It is not fun. We're just going to pretend like this is better than what it is. And maybe I'll add a bit of a feather or something like that. So I'll see what ended up being the best part of my mask before I make a decision on where exactly my dog should be. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm pretty sure my dog's going to tuck behind here. So I did that actually on my background layer, which was not ideal. Instead, just to fix this, I'm going to, oops, my goodness. All right, I'm going to click on my layer, change this to foreground new, because we can't have two layers that are named the same thing, and then change this to background. Don't mind me, guys, I just did it wrong. So foreground jumps up here, background's in the background now, and then I can see what's actually going on here. If I shy out background and all I see is my foreground, that's all it is, right? I made that mask there, and I can see my dog, which I can also shy out. That's what my one mask is. Then if I add in my background, it looks like it's just the original image. If I add in the dog, if I put the dog behind the mask, there we go. Now my dog is hiding out behind this mountain. And he's not perfect because my mask wasn't big enough. I can go back here and kind of change that so it covers up his feet too. Alright, much better. Okay, so that's kind of what I was wanting to go for here. Dog behind the mountain. He's probably going to look around and do some stuff. Maybe a hand comes out and feeds him. It'll be interesting. But my computer is not liking all this 4K footage and stuff. It's running a little bit slow, so I'm not going to play this back. Oh, it's doing okay. I'll let it play back. So I can see some issues with my mask here. I could definitely clean that up a little bit. I'm going to be really cheap about it though, and I'm going to go under my mask properties, and I'm going to add a little bit of feather. So if you do this like as a professional thing, you probably shouldn't just add the feather to make it nicer, but if you're in a bind and you're trying to, well, you know, if you're doing it professionally and they're not paying you very much, then maybe just add some feather to your mask. All right, my dog looks pretty good back there. That's kind of what I was wanting to do, but I want to add a couple of effects on the dog to make him look like he belongs here a little bit more. He's a little bit too golden for me. I want to match these colors a little bit better. So I had that initial Lumetri color that made our green screen look greener, and then I could use my key light to pull that easier. So from here I'm going to add another Lumetri. There it is. And this is Lumetri color 2, and we just want to make sure for any kind of creative things we do, it happens after key light. There is like an order of operations here. If we put this above key light, it might change the green screen, which would affect our matte, right? Because if the green changes, it's not going to pull nearly as nice. So I can just go under basic correction here, and I can probably eyeball some things to make it look a little bit better. And that doesn't look great, so maybe I want to do something a little bit more precise. So if I go... So we know about all of these things. We've used these things before, but there's also things like curves, which you should be familiar with from Photoshop. If you liked curves before, we can add, say, curves to our dog. And now he's really contrasty, but that doesn't look too far off actually. So maybe I do keep a little bit of an S curve on here, since that didn't hurt anything at all. There are all these awesome, cool curves that you don't have in Photoshop. When you look at curves, though, there's hue versus hue versus luma, hue versus saturation, which is up above it. And that just means you are selecting the hue and you are adjusting its whatever it says after versus. So if we look at his pink in his ear and stuff, we can select that out by putting 2 nodes on either side of, I hate when people say either side, on both sides of the red area of the hue. So from pink to yellow, now red is kind of selected in here, and we can add one more and lift it up or down, so we can take our reds and really enhance those. Looks like he's got a bloody nose now. Or we can bring those way down if we're like, hey, those reds are just too prominent, and that actually looks a little bit closer to what we have in the overall image. And then we can do something like hue versus hue as well. So if there's like some yellows in here, and we want to adjust the color of the color. So if we took the yellows and we pushed them, those yellows could turn green, or they could turn magenta if we went really far with it. But we could also just kind of push it a little bit in one direction, and then it would go a little bit green. But maybe I'm going too far. That's a little bit better. And then if you don't like curves at all, you can also open up color wheels over here, and you can adjust shadows, midtones, and highlights. You can actually make each of these things individually brighter. If we want our highlights to get brighter, you can see that raise up or bring them down. I kind of made that adjustment already with my curves, but just so you can see shadows coming down, that would add some contrast. Shadows coming up, that would make everything look a little bit more flat. But I can also, if you want these things to go back to normal, you can just double click, by the way. I can also add some color to, say, shadows, since you see so much kind of blue in these shadows here. That might help with my image. Now my dog is all of a sudden, maybe my midtones need to go a little bit more blue too. Not too much though. Maybe more like a teal. Alright, now all of a sudden my dog's looking a lot closer to my background. So I can just toggle this off by clicking the FX icon next to Lumetri Color 2. That's what it looked like before, and that's what it looked like afterward. I would say that's a drastic improvement. We could get really fine-tuned with this stuff if you know anything about color grading and stuff. You can open up like Lumetri scopes in here, so Lumetri scopes, and actually see what's going on. Maybe. Mine doesn't want to cooperate with me, but if your computer can handle it, oh, there it goes. You can see your scopes, and you can adjust these scopes to be whatever you want it to be. If you right click here, if you're used to histogram, you can see a histogram view. All that stuff's available to you if you're so inclined. If everybody really wants more information about Lumetri and color grading in general to make your videos look a little bit nicer, I wouldn't be against showing you a quick rundown of how that stuff works. All right, so looks like my whole thing exploded. All right, I'm back. I had a fun little crash there. I had to relaunch the program. So hopefully I cut that out for you and you didn't have to sit through all that fun stuff. All right, so at this point I have my dog, and it's looking good in terms of its color, it's looking good in terms of its chroma key, and it's looking good in terms of its masks. So it's kind of behind some element there. It really is part of our video. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to add a preset. I want to add that Jarley's handheld camera preset. And to do that, I actually need to work outside the program initially and then relaunch the program, and it's going to work out for me. I spelled chroma key wrong. Fun with this laptop. Okay, so I am going to open up that zip folder that I created. Apparently, if you're on a Mac, it just automatically unzips things. So what I need out of here is not the After Effects project file. Instead, I need this folder here. I want the whole folder though, the thing with the exclamation point, Deadpool handheld camera. I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to head to this very specific location, and that is under Documents, Adobe, After Effects CC 2019 or 2020 or After Effects 2020, whichever After Effects you're using. And then User Presets, and then I'm going to paste it right here. So the User Presets file under the After Effects folder that is on your computer. I'm not exactly sure what that is on a Mac, but let's look it up real quick. So according to Adobe's website, if you're on a Mac and you want to put this preset where it needs to go, it looks like it's under Applications, Adobe After Effects CC, and that's it. So look for that, and then I'm sure it says User Presets under that folder, and that's where you want to put it. The User Presets folder, that's where it needs to go. Copy and paste it, but as soon as you do, you won't actually be able to use it yet. You need to shut down the program and then relaunch the program. So I'll do that for you, if I can spell. There it is. After Effects 2020. Now when you launch the program, you see all these things that fly by, a bunch of text here. Somewhere in there it says reading user presets, and it's looking in that folder for presets that should exist. So I'm going to reopen my project, and then I am going to search in my effects and presets for Deadpool. Okay, and then here it is for any sized footage and for oversized footage. And there's a bunch of different presets for this stuff. So there's something with long lenses for a camcorder look, or for somewhat steady camera movement, as though you're trying to hold the camera very steady. Now what we're going to do to use this thing is, first we're going to trim down our work area to match the length of our video. So that's 30 seconds here, and I probably don't need that much, but we're going to do it anyway because I'm not sure which part of the dog I like so much. Then we're going to highlight all of our layers. We are going to pre-compose this thing as a chroma key, and we'll move all attributes to that pre-comp. And then we can experiment with these things. We can drag and drop each of them and see what happens. So click drag and drop that onto our pre-comp, so it'll affect all of our stuff. And you'll notice right away it's going to push your video off a little bit. And you just want to click and grab that thing and put it back in place to where it should be. And that's for, I used the 4 oversized footage, and I'm not even sure which kind or which one I picked. But if I let that render for a second, I should see okay, I didn't let the whole thing render. I just let it go for a couple of seconds so I can see what's going on here. And it's not looking too bad. It looks like some camera movement, and it's somewhat steady, so I don't know that the motion blur would do a whole lot for us here. If you picked something that has more of a shaky movement, you'll notice a more pronounced area of your frame that isn't being taken up by the actual footage. And we're going to clean that up really easy just by scaling up our footage. So S on your keyboard for the pre-comp, and we'll scale that thing up. And if we kind of scrub through here, even though it's not rendering out our footage at a resolution where we can tell what's going on, we can still see the frame and how it's moving. And it should be, you should have it scaled up enough so that you don't expose any of the black background or whatever kind of background you have here. Maybe I'd trim this down to not have the hand jump in there, so it's a little bit shorter too. We don't need 30 seconds of it. Okay, so that should be good. If your camera does move a lot, we can toggle on motion blur for it, and we can actually see the motion blur work. And maybe we can see a little bit here, but it's probably not super pronounced. Something that we should certainly add if you have a lot of camera shake in there, though. But also with this preset, if we want to see what's actually going on, it's just a series of keyframes, right, for position. So if we went to position here, we could see a whole bunch of keyframes that were created here, and it goes for 45 seconds. But if we needed to make our animation longer, we can always copy these keyframes, move our playhead to the last keyframe, and then paste them, and it can go on indefinitely from there. But if you want to see exactly what's going on with all keyframes, it's not just position. So if you press U on your keyboard, that's the shortcut to see all keyframes. So press U there. It's not just position, but it's also rotation. And it looks like they are all eases as well. So they're doing some tricky stuff with that stuff. So if we wanted to extend that beyond, we would also need to copy those keyframes, and we could copy both at the same time if we just opened the U and actually saw what was going on there. So that's it in a nutshell. We now know how to add presets. We know how to chroma key. We know how to mask, basically. And you should be able to come up with your own unique, interesting video that is chroma keyed from some kind of green screen footage that you pulled on offline, using a still image as your background and adding camera shake and motion blur to kind of bring it all together. So let's see your versions of that. You must have a still image, a chroma key, subject, and some kind of color work on it to make it all look normal. Also, you have to add the Jarley's Deadpool preset. Shouldn't be too terribly difficult. Maybe slightly time consuming if you happen to have a weird chroma key like me. So make your video, export your video, publish it on Canvas just like we do with everything else. And that's it for this week. I will see you all next week.